I am sure you're probably about as zoomed out as we are, but we're going to do our very best to make today as engaging as we possibly can. I welcome you to keep your cameras on if you'd like to. If you're not comfortable with that and you want to turn them off, that's great too. I would ask yourself muted unless you're asking a question or responding to a conversation. That's just so if a dog barks or a kid yells or a spouse walks in with something to say, they're not distracting. I work at home quite a bit, and so does my husband, so I get that. The other thing is the Amazon man seems to come to my house about 3 times a week. So the doorbell rings, all those little distractions. So if we could just keep ourselves on mute, that will help us to stay focused on our speaker and the conversation that's happening. And speaking of conversations, we do invite you to put any questions you might have in chat. I will be monitoring the chat on our speaker's behalf, and I will let her know when there's a question that pops up in there that we need to address. But we would ask that you hold your chatter in the chat to a minimal, because what happens is people get busy responding to the chat and then they miss what our speaker's saying. So let's save the conversation for our lunchtime. And speaking of lunchtime, let's talk a little bit about the layout for today. Lisa Raftery is our speaker, and she will introduce herself in a few minutes. She's going to start us off with about 45 to 50 minutes of topical conversation, and she's going to facilitate that for us. We will then take a short break while everybody grabs their lunch, and when you come back, you're going to have been assigned to a lunchroom. The lunchrooms are your place to ask each other questions, have conversations about the things that you've heard from Lisa or from some of the other participants. This is a chance for you to kind of brainstorm and meditate and chew on not just your lunch, but what you might have heard happening this morning. We recommend that you take note of the lunchroom that you're in. Sign yourself a speaker so that someone is taking notes and paying attention, so that when we come back together, we can ask questions or share aha moments, you know, when those light bulbs. I would also ask that you be considerate of the number of people at your table and the conversations. Try to step up when you have something to say, but also try to step back and make sure that other people at the table have room for conversation. It can be really easy to focus on maybe something that's happening in your life personally. And we'll welcome that conversation maybe after the training today. But let's try to be just really respectful of our time and conversation and make sure that everyone's voice is being heard today. I'm going to encourage you to use the reactions that are at the bottom of your screen. You can see there's a thumbs up, there's an applause, there's a happy face. That's a great way to let us know that we're on the right track and that you're really excited about something that we're saying. Again, if you have a question, you can raise your hand and we can address it, or you can feel free to put it in the chat box. Yeah, as you might have seen, Sandy Hillen is our operations director here at PATH, and she is going to be helping us co-host today. She is taking attendance. So if you can please make sure that your first and last name are on your screen, at least for now. You can change that if you want something else later, but that will help us match who's here to who we have registered. Let's see what else. So one more housekeeping thing before we get started. We will follow up this email with an email that will include the link to the recording as well as a survey. Please take the time to do those surveys. There's only about 10 questions. They don't take very long at all, but they really help us know if we're hitting the mark and serving you the best way that we can. So please take a moment and do those, and we'll remind you of that again at the end of today's session as well. So if there are no other questions or comments, we'll go ahead and get started. Lisa Raftery is amazing. She is a friend of mine. We've known each other for a very long time. She is an author. She is a blogger. And just an amazing all-around person and mom and wife. And I will let her tell you all about herself in her opening comments. So Lisa, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Donna. I really appreciate it. And let me just start by saying how much I appreciate you, Donna. I mean, honestly, I've had the privilege of seeing her start her journey with Path, taking the helm, and just the amazing job that you and your team are doing to help teenagers. We were talking about the numbers of kids that you've actually reached. I think it was like 300,000. I mean, it was amazing. And the work that you do is so important. So I think we all here like giving you major kudos for your
Thank
dedication
you.
to our kids and just helping them make healthy choices and have a healthy understanding for their lives. So thank you, and thanks for having me here today. I'm so excited to be with you all, and I'm going to share my screen here in a minute. But my name is Lisa Raftery, and I have been an educator for about 27 years. I taught public high school. I've kind of taught everything. I've taught private school. I've taught in co-ops. I've taught in charter schools. So I'm all about youth, and my husband was in full-time ministry for about 18 years. So I've been a ministry wife and just a lot of experiences through that. Most recently, we moved to California and we had an after-school program for kids living in restricted income housing. We work with life skills and just teaching them not only to have dreams, but to take action steps to see their dreams come true. So we did that for 5 years, and now we're living in Nebraska. So never thought I'd be in Nebraska, but here we are enjoying some great things in Omaha. And so I'm turning my attention to education again and to some projects that are dear to my heart and some consulting and some speaking and things like that. So that's where I come from. My husband and I have 4 children. So let me share my screen as we get going here. I want to make sure that we are. Mhm. So can you see my screen, everybody? Yes? Okay, great. But it is probably blocked. Is it potentially blocked by all this fun over here? So let me do this. And let me move this bar over and move this up. Okay, how's that? Better? Good, Donna?
It looks good, Lisa.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay, so um, as I said before, my husband and I, so this is our crew, our very fun world that we have. My hubby Eric and I have, as he says, we have a son and 3 weddings. So we have 3 daughters, and our kids' ages range from 21 to 14. So I am definitely in the throes of parenting and mentoring just like you are. So, today we're going to talk about communicating with teens in a way that actually, and honestly, um, we're constantly communicating with our teens, whether it's through our words, our actions, our reactions. And so this is just really a topic that all of us are excited about, we need information about. And so a lot of times, chances are we're doing so much communicating, but often we wonder, are they really hearing us? Like, is there a way to do it even more effectively? So as we all know, parenting is an incredibly meaningful, it's fulfilling, it's beautiful, it's this precious experience. I know that parenting can bring some of our most special, wonderful, and happy moments in life, right? But parenting is also hard, like really hard. Sometimes it can be incredibly frustrating, it can be exhausting, it can be overwhelming, and it honestly, if we're honest, can bring us some of the most painful moments in our lives as well. So that's why we all can use some help as we navigate some difficult years that they're developmental years, and in that way they can be difficult for both parent and child. So I'm really proud of each one of you as you're here today, just taking initiative as a parent or as a mentor for wisdom and support for the most important mission on earth. And that, of course, is to bring up responsible adults who are also amazing people living with purpose. And that's a critical and a pretty daunting mission if you think about it. So no pressure, right? Parenting's always been such a calling, but our current culture has made our job harder than ever. So, communication is constantly modeled to our teens, but it's not always positive. So media tends to teach our kids how to be funny at the expense of respect. So memes, sitcoms, and many of the multi-episode shows that our teens might binge watch or their friends are watching, are really all about a laugh at someone else's friends. And most of the communication that teens today see modeled is disrespectful towards adults for the sake of humor. So, take a look at this meme to the left-hand slide, for example. The teen states basically, I don't want to clean my room or do my homework, and you can't make me. And what's the mom's response? Like, does she deal with the behavior? Does she answer back? Whatever. No, she just says, well, but what kind of pizza do you want? And then, of course, at the bottom, it just shows me. Here's my responses. The teen is just like, pepperoni, So, the whole point of this meme is it's supposed to be realistic and therefore hilarious. So those are the types of things that a lot of times our kids are feeding on or seeing. And don't get me wrong, you're looking at this picture, like my family has seen plenty of lab rats. So I'm not saying we can't watch certain shows, but it is a dynamic that we have to deal with about media and how it really is affecting our students or our teens' understanding of how communication really works. And meanwhile, social media is another animal that can take a well-adjusted teen, right, and turn him on his or her ear with just a handful of hateful comments or a lack of like, or maybe just a stream of unattainable content, right? Like other young people with seemingly perfect body or just tons of friends. So as we're working through this, our mission as parents and mentors, it still remains unchanged, right? We just simply have to be more strategic and more intentional than ever. And we can learn effective ways to just build stronger relationships with our teens and to develop more effective communication. So it is possible, and I just want to encourage you today, no matter how great your communication is with your teens right now, or potentially how horrible you feel like it's going, I really think we're going to share some important things today that are going to help things get better. They're going to help. If they're good, they're going to get better. And if they're not great, they're going to improve. So I'm excited about what we're going to tackle today. Because communicating with teens is definitely an art. So they call it the art of communication. And honestly, it's an art because sometimes it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to us. And it is something that we actually get better at. It's a skill that we can hone with use. So it's also an art because it can be subjective. You can have the best talk with teen one. You're like, wow, I am such a good parent. That went great. And then you try the same talk with teen two at some point and you feel like you just crashed and burned. So, I saw a meme the other day that said the same water that softens the potato hardens the egg. So your same parenting that you do, right, the same thing could have different results according to the material of your teen, particularly at a certain season of their life. So that's why we have to be very strategic with each teen that we're working with and each situation. And honestly, that's why we can't take it personally. And I'm probably going to say this 5 different times today in different ways about not taking it personally because sometimes it's just in them. I mean, sometimes our teens truly have to learn the hard way sometimes. And honestly, despite our beautiful parenting, it really is something that they're going to have to learn. And we do that beautiful parenting, however, because it honestly will benefit them and it's worth our time and attention. So in today's session, I'm going to share some strategies for effective communication with the teens in your life. And honestly, some of these might be new to you. I really hope that I bring some fresh things, some fresh perspectives for you, and some literally, here's a script. Here are some great strategies to help you just improve the communication that you have. But a lot of times they're just great reminders. I have found there have been many times I'm reading a parenting book or I'm watching a seminar or I'm at a conference and everything that the speaker is saying, I think to myself, oh, I know this. But honestly, sometimes things that are in our lives are so in our face and we're so kind of distracted by what's going on or the situation we're in or the problem we're having with said teen, etc. We kind of forget to do what we know. So today, some of these concepts might be ones you already know, but it's just a chance to take inventory and ask yourself, am I doing what I know? And are there things I can adjust to get some better results? So today we're going to cover 5 of the 10 keys to communicating with teens in a way that actually works. So I did a lot of work and research and I talked to Donna and we're going to cover 5 today so we can really do them well. And then I'm going to come back in June and finish with part 2 to finish 6 through 10. So today we're going to talk about number 1, understanding our teens' need to feel safe. Number 2, utilizing effective methods of communication. Number 3, the key is to master the language of respect. Number 4, to leverage words of affirmation and praise. Number 5, to learn to be a good listener with good questions. And then in June, we're going to come back and talk about deciphering teen speak. We're going to talk about being the adult. That's easier said than done sometimes. And we're going to talk about being safe space for our teens, about creating space and time for two-way communication, and the last key, number 10, to communicate the right things to yourself. Because sometimes we're really hard on ourselves as parents. We just want to be perfect. We want to always get it right. And a lot of times we fight guilt and we fight telling ourselves a lot of the wrong things. And so we're going to talk about some of the great right things to be telling ourselves as we go through this journey. So I just want to encourage you to feel free to just screenshot if you want as we're going through this. Sometimes instead of taking notes on 10 points, it's just easier to screenshot as you go. Then what I do is I just throw them in a folder and I can look at them and organize them later. So a few years ago, I attended an educational conference whose keynote speaker was Tyler Durden. He's the author of Counterintuitive, What 4 Million Teenagers Wish We Knew. So I bought his book when I was at the conference as well, and I highly recommend it. It is an excellent resource. It has lots of insight for us as parents or mentors of teens. And during his speech and in his book, Tyler explains how most of us parent or mentor out of what we know and feel intuitively. Okay, so we often just do what feels right, and then we're often frustrated and discouraged when our methods of communication and parenting do not yield all the results for which we were really hoping. And so he describes this phenomenon as facing the direction that we want to go as parents and teens. I mean, we have goals. We have this idea of where we want to go, of what we want it to look like, and we have the intention of moving towards them. We're in that direction, but we actually, because of our intuitive methods that we're using to communicate, we actually start stepping backwards away from our goal. It's kind of like we're Michael Jackson moonwalking in the opposite direction. And sometimes as parents and mentors, we have to do what's counterintuitive to actually have results. And in his book, Tyler shares a story that I think is going to serve as a great visual to keep before us as we work with our teens. And Tyler references looking to buy a plantation cottage in Hawaii. And, a plantation cottage means it's built differently than houses that most of us are used to because it's single wall construction. And Tyler's warned by a contractor friend, like he tells his friend, I'm going to go see this plantation. And he's like, okay, before you go, do not fall in love with it because you're going to need to test the walls before you make an offer. And basically what he says is you have to do a thorough check on the walls. I mean, I want you to take a rubber mallet, and I want you to go through the walls of the house, beat on each one to make sure that the walls are strong enough, right? Make sure they're not rotten, that they're not, termite eaten up. And so you want to make sure that the walls are strong so you know the structure is safe. And so, naturally, Tyler falls in love with the property immediately. He walks on, he's like, okay, I want to buy this 100%. But he's like, okay, I'm going to do my due diligence before I make an offer. And I'm going to methodically push and bang on every wall of the home, right? He actually doesn't have a rubber mallet. I think he just uses his hand, picks it a little bit. So he's going to check the walls, right? And in his book on page 30, he writes, as I went around banging and pushing, I wasn't hoping that I was stronger than the walls. I was hoping they would be stronger than me. And when any child or teenager pushes against us, they're hoping for the same thing. They're not testing us because they want us to give in. They're testing because their deeper need is to find reassurance we won't. And wow, just let that soak in for a moment. I just want to start with this quote because it gives us some understanding as to why teens can be such a challenge sometimes. Why they do test us so often. And as we talk about communicating with teens, it's just so important to realize that it's not personal. It really isn't. It's about our teens' need to feel safe and to feel that we're strong enough to be there for them. And yes, it feels personal to us. But when we understand that it's not, it's so helpful. And when I'm tempted to take things personally, as I often am, I just make myself step back and visualize this Hawaiian cottage. And it helps just to give me grace to that teen that I was just about to lose my temper with. So this visual can help us all just proceed in a way when we start to communicate with our teens that we can communicate that they are safe with us as parents and mentors who are stronger than them. And as I shared, my hubby and I have 4 kids, and more than one of them is very strong-willed. But that's not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing to have strong-willed children, because they're going to grow up to be strong-willed, great leaders if we kind of channel that for good, right? And I can remember a moment that I had with my youngest, and I did get her permission today to share this, but when she was about 8, I mean, look at these pictures. Like, she's pretty tenacious. Like, look at how she's eating that donut. So she's like, do not take this donut from me. And, look at her, like, she's just loving life, trying to have her aunt sit on her shoulders, which that's an optical illusion, but whatever. And obviously she's not going to take off her goggles just to eat lunch. Like, she's got things to do. So I've got this strong-willed 8-year-old at the time who was just testing me big time in a moment. And I don't know what came over me or why I did it, but I just got nice and close. And I said with a smile, I said, okay, yep, yes, you are strong. I love that. But guess what? I'm stronger. And I just remember it totally took her by surprise. And she actually just burst out laughing. And then, of course, that made me laugh. And then we had a hug and we just moved on with our day. Okay, so I don't recommend that direct of an approach necessarily with your teens, but it is a great reminder to all of us that it's so important to communicate to our teens that we are stronger than them and that we can help them grow up healthy and strong themselves. And as we'll talk about later, we communicate that strength with our words, but also with our actions and our reactions. That's a good one, and we'll get to that later. So let's move on to key number 2, which is to utilize effective methods of communication. And obviously that's obvious. We don't want to use ineffective ones. We want to use effective ones. But it really helps us to start by recognizing what is ineffective and what do we want to avoid. And let's just look at number 1, nagging. Obviously, nagging is not effective because no doubt we've all tried it. So I know I have. And teens are masters at ignoring requests, right? Especially, even if they're repeated tirelessly. So if there's no authentic consequence on its way for stalling or ignoring parents' direction, no amount of nagging proves to motivate action from a teen, or at least not consistently. So let's just avoid that one. It doesn't work. Lecturing is not effective because we lose our audience after a while, right? I think explaining and mentoring is important, but not lecturing where there's no interaction on the side of the audience. That's what lecturing means, right? And truthfully, it just serves us well to explain in as few words as possible. So to get our point across in a meaningful way, but not to belabor that point. And for me, that has been probably one of my greatest challenges, because obviously I like to talk and I have so much wisdom to share. So there have been many times that, in my great sharing of wisdom, my kids have stopped me and said, oh, okay, Mom, we get it. We got it. Okay. So anyway, I'm preaching to myself on that one. All right, guilting. Well, this might be one that's easy to fall into, especially if we were mentored by very skilled guilters. But that's always a lose-lose. So you might motivate teens to sometimes do what you've asked, but you're building resentment in their hearts most likely. So it isn't positive and it really isn't necessary. So let's avoid that. Obviously, yelling is not helpful or positive for our relationship with our teens. And this one can be incredibly tempting in stressful and frustrating moments. I'm a sanguine mom with a lot of passion and energy, and so I know how easy it is to lose one's temper with a teen that's bringing that rubber mallet pretty hard on your walls. So, but that said, the more that we can stay away from yelling, the better, because it might be intuitive, it might feel easy to fall into, but it just isn't productive. So let's leave that one to the side. All right, hinting. Well, hinting around for what you want your teen to do or to change is honestly a mistake, because it can be annoying to the person on the receiving end. And most people, including our teens, would just prefer to be asked, right? It just feels more honest and it feels more respectful. Assuming. Assuming things is a missed opportunity to clarify expectations and then actually see them fulfilled. Because if you just assume they're going to do, the wife that just like, my husband should know what makes me feel loved, or my husband should know what I want for my birthday. Don't assume people are going to figure things out, and definitely don't assume that your teenager is just going to know what you want, right? So, you've got the parent that's like, oh my gosh, I assumed you would clean up the sleepover mess in the basement from last night before grandma came over today, right? So now that parent's all upset that that teenager didn't think to do that before their mother-in-law walked in. We all love our mother-in-laws. We want them to be proud of the women that we are, or the moms or dads that we are. And so I'm very grateful. I have a wonderful mother-in-law. She's very supportive. But, it would have just been easier to explain to your teen, hey, before grandma gets here, I just want to make sure this is picked up and that we're ready to receive a visitor. So sometimes assuming things in another way, it can communicate low expectations for our teens. I know that sometimes we can just assume they don't care about something or they forgot to do it without really ascertaining the situation. And I remember I had one teenager who was in charge of taking out the garbage, and this had been an area of growth that, wasn't done so consistently. We worked with this teen, and finally it was actually happening, and I was super excited. And then when I looked out, and those cans are not out like the responsibility that's been given. And so I was so frustrated, like, oh, here we go again. And so I went to kind of talk to this teen, and I wasn't happy. But before I just kind of lit into this teen, I thought, okay, I'm going to change my normal strategy of being upset. And I thought, I'm just going to ask the teen about it. So I basically just went up to the teen and said, hey, what's your plan for the garbage this week? And the teen looked at me and went, hey, Mom, it's Monday. The trash doesn't go out till tomorrow. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just assumed he'd forgotten or didn't care or wasn't taking that responsibility seriously once again. But the truth of the matter is, I was the one who didn't have the right information. So we have to be careful that we don't hurt them by just assuming they're doing it wrong again, but instead using our questions to just ascertain the situation first. And so I was really glad he didn't know what I was thinking in my head. So our kids tend to be, pretty reasonable, but sometimes we have to make sure that we're being reasonable too. So there is a pretty good saying, something about assuming, making something out of you and me, but I'm going to skip that for now. But let's just say, let's not assume in our parenting. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is accusing. Again, by choosing our words differently, we can go from accusing to asking our teens. And it's so important to make that adjustment. Instead of, did you take my car yesterday after I said no? And then put that dent in it, angry tone included, we're wiser to just ask, do you know what happened to my car? It has a dent in the fender. So I'm not saying you can't have real life tone. You're obviously not happy about this and you need to know what happened. But by asking and not accusing, we just give our teen a chance to potentially take responsibility for actions, to apologize, to make amends, right? Or it gives the teen the opportunity to show what really happened. Maybe it's teen number 3 who actually took the car and had the fender bender. So another thing with accusing, I've heard a lot of parents ask their questions with pressure applied for a certain answer. And we want to be really careful about this. So, for example, you didn't drink at that party last night, right? Okay, well, this wording, it makes it really hard for the teen to contradict the parent's expectation, right? The teen actually feels pressure to agree with the parent and to say what the parent obviously wants to hear. So if you get asked, you didn't drink last night, right? It's a lot easier just to say, oh, right, I wouldn't do that. It takes courage to tell the truth, but it takes extra courage to actually counter a parent's obvious preference for an answer. So now the teen is more than aware, even more than normal, how disappointed that the parent's going to be by the truth. And so they just feel so much pressure to just say what's going to make the parent happy. And it makes it harder than it should be honest. It's very hard now for that person or that teen to say, actually, I did, Dad. I felt a lot of pressure and I did drink with my friends. So we're going to get a lot more honest answers from our teens if we take the extra pressure off of our questions by just simply asking, did you drink at that party last night? So let's make sure we're not using wording that makes our teens feel pressure to answer how we want them to, as tempting as it is. Okay, venting. Now this one might seem obvious, but in a weak moment, it's not uncommon for frustrated parents to vocalize their frustration, right? Just like it just comes out, saying things like, oh, you're just such a selfish brat, or, oh, you're just so lazy and unmotivated. And sometimes a parent will just start venting their frustrations. And I'm not talking about venting to a spouse when they come home about your day or things that happened or things you are legitimately frustrated with your teen about. I'm talking about venting to our teens about our teens. And again, it might be intuitive to just share our feelings. Like, I gotta be honest, I gotta be real. But these are young people in our care who are still developing their brains. They're still developing their characters. So who they are at 14 is not going to be who they are at 24, right? I mean, not if we continue to mentor and invest in them. So sometimes teens do act like brats, right? Sometimes teens do behave like irresponsible yahoos. That's just because their brains and characters are still in development. And we've got to be careful that we don't paint the picture in their heads that that's who they are in essence. And it's normal for parents to feel like venting temporary feelings, right, in a heated moment. But it's so important to hold our tongues. I mean, we have got to do what's counterintuitive in that moment, like Tyler Derman said, and do what is best for our bratty teen. Okay, kidding, but maybe not kidding. So, very few teens hear, like, I can't believe you're so lazy, and then suddenly become motivated to excel. And now there are a few that do, but they usually do so as a reaction to being hurt by those words. And so they grow up with resentment in their hearts. And honestly, none of us want that for our teens, right? So we're going to avoid venting if we can. Oops. Well, now you just saw the dictionary, maybe. Okay, thoughtless words can cut deep, and especially when they're coming from an authority figure. And they can't be unsaid, right? So like toothpaste in a tube, they can't be put back. So when you just can't help it, you just can't help but say something ugly, run to the closet, okay? Whisper it into a pillow stuffed in your face if you must, okay? But just do your best to deal with your frustrations alone with another trusted adult or maybe in prayer, but just don't let your teens hear your thoughts in your weakest moments, okay? Negative declarations to our teens really do not help solve the problems that we're facing together. And we most likely are going to have to eat our words one way or another, either as an apology or when they're thrown back in our face at some point, like, oh yeah, well, you said such and such. Okay, but when we do say something, or if we do say something that we know isn't right or that we regret, as we all do in life sometimes, we need to model the behavior we want from our teens when they make a bad choice. And that's apologize, we ask for forgiveness, and we make amends. Just something simple can just be, son, I am so sorry. In my frustration, I just said words that I do not mean. It was wrong. Will you please forgive me? And it's amazing what those honest words mean to our teens. It actually shows strength to own it when we make mistakes too. And while we never want to get this wrong, when we do, we get to show our teens how to maintain healthy relationships through taking responsibility, apologizing, and asking forgiveness from those we've hurt. And these are lessons that are going to serve them well when they're navigating relationships as adults one day. And my last thought on venting is just be really careful about venting to your other kids about the teen that you're upset with, because it can cause siblings to resent each other. Resent each other for making dad upset all the time or for making mom cry. But often it just makes them resent you for putting them in that position, right? For putting a burden on them they really aren't equipped to bear. I mean, they really can't change the dynamics. They're siblings in the home. And they can start to resent you for not being strong enough to let them be kids while you deal with the grown-up stuff. So it really is best to find another adult to work with. And while you're working your feelings through with another adult versus using your kids for that. So now that we know some methods to avoid, let's move on to the positive side. What are some effective methods for communication that we can utilize? And again, feel free to screenshot as we go. So We're going to communicate in a way that typically works best for boys and girls. We're going to choose effective environments. We're going to provide clear expectations, particularly regarding how their choices determine their levels of freedom. We're going to communicate out of our belief in our teen, and we're going to use non-threatening mediums to initiate discussions. So to communicate effectively, we need to understand that typically boys and girls communicate differently. In Tyler's live presentation that I attended, he shared a study in which researchers found that, generally speaking, boys preferred to communicate shoulder to shoulder or side by side, while girls generally turned their chairs towards one another so they could communicate face to face. And this is great insight for us as parents. You'll probably get more information and communication out of your teen son if you go for a walk and you chat side by side. Boys also tend to communicate well in the car while they're sitting next to you in the passenger seat, not having to look you in the eye the whole time. So for talks with your daughter, you might sit cross-legged on her bed, maybe in the bedroom, face to face, or across a table at Panera, chatting over soup or dessert. But face to face might work best with your daughter. And obviously we can and should communicate with our teens anywhere, right? And everywhere, right? At home, in the car, walking around the neighborhood. And sometimes we want to jump into something right away, like right when something happens, we're going to take care of it or whatnot. But, first just consider if we're allowing our teens the privacy to truly engage with us. In other words, it's best to communicate correction or important conversations privately without the embarrassment of being called out or corrected in front of friends or siblings or other adults, like maybe grandma's visiting or this neighbor's over. We love our teens, right? We want to help them understand concepts. We want them to own their behavior, potentially commit to changed behavior. Though this doesn't typically tend to happen when you're humiliated in front of others. So someone who feels respected and valued is going to respond much better than someone who felt devalued by just our lack of foresight or lack of consideration. So communicate somewhere privately. Maybe it is the living room, but just the rest of the family's elsewhere, or a bedroom, or your backyard, or maybe go out into the garage, whatever, but sometimes using a neutral place to chat works well too. So we had lots of corrective talks in one of our teens' bedrooms. So at one point when we needed to have a serious conversation, we chose to take this teen out to dinner and just talk after the meal over dessert so it wouldn't feel like other times. Like we wanted that older teen to feel respected in a new way. And so we chose a different approach and a different location. And thankfully the night went really, really well. So maybe just find a park trail or some other place that feels fresh for important conversations and moments together. And depending on the situation, it can speak volumes to your teens that you took the time and effort to make it special or to make it focused. And sometimes it's nice to have a relational experience where the talking through things was just part of it and that it just wasn't the whole of it. Now, we cannot assume that our teens know what we expect, right? So it's our responsibility to clearly communicate our expectations. So communicating expectations, are clearly defined ones, serve as a GPS to help our teens successfully navigate and move forward in their life journey while still living in our homes or under our authority. And this includes expectations of behavior, but that involves like our family values, like honesty, gratitude, kindness, serving others. Life isn't just about you. These are our expectations for our home. And then clearly communicated expectations on their responsibilities, whether that's at home, at school, job, church, clubs, whatever. And teens need to have a clear understanding of consequences and rewards for their behavior and choices. And we need to clearly explain how freedoms, right, like earning and losing freedom, works in our homes. And we gotta show them, like, listen, I want you to have as much freedom as you can handle. Like, that's actually good for me. I'm excited to see you grow up. And so showing them that it's really in their hands. The more that you can handle responsibly, the more you get. And if I see that you cannot handle a responsibility or freedom, then it will be taken away until you can show me that you truly are ready and you earn it back. And then we need to actually follow through on everything. I mean, that's been my hardest thing. I come up with great plans and then, I'm going to inspect your room every night. If it's clean, great, right? And then, 3 days later, I'm like, whoa, why is this room so messy? Well, it's because I never came in and looked. So, it's at the end of the day, the hardest part really, once we've communicated, is just to be consistent and vigilant to do what we say. That's the key that will unlock the results that we're really hoping for. So Our mentoring is going to seem hollow if we're not strong enough to calmly and consistently follow through on what we say. So it's not always easy to follow through, but if I can do it, you can do it, and we can be strong parents in that way together. And that brings us to the next effective method of communication, and that's to communicate out of our belief in our teens. Some parents feel like my teen needs to rise to a challenge, so I'm going to act like maybe you can't do this so that I can motivate them. They'll prove me wrong. But that might work for some teens, but again, it's a losing strategy because it probably has resentment involved. So it's good to challenge our kids. How about, hey, I think you could do this, so let's do a challenge, more on the positive side. So it's better to communicate high expectation and work, like I see that you could do this, instead of communicating out of our fears that, oh, they're going to fail. I mean, some parents are so worried about their teens failing, they communicate that they honestly expect it to happen. So what teens are really feeling is that their parents expect them to be deceitful or to make dumb choices, and sometimes they'll often quit trying and just fulfill the prophecy. Oh, we don't want to do that, right? We want to believe the best. We want that they'll live up to that expectation, and then we're going to navigate life with them and help them as they grow. So we don't want to make them feel like I'll just fail and get it over with, because that's what they expect anyway. So we just have to be careful about the language that we use with our teens, so we're actually communicating things that are helpful. All right, our next effective method is using non-threatening mediums to initiate conversations and discuss important topics. So we can find teachable moments in other people's lives so we're not constantly dialed in on our teen's life. Okay. When my kids were a bit younger, my mother and I actually wrote a novel series for young women, in part so they'd have something fun, exciting, and meaningful to read, but really also so that moms and mentors could discuss characters' choices. So it's non-threatening to discuss why characters are doing this or a character's doing that, right? To talk about a character's struggles without making it personal to your teen. So you could say, well, why did Julia feel insignificant without a boyfriend? I don't have to say to my daughter, do you feel insignificant without a boyfriend? So I don't need to project anything on her. We can talk about all these dynamics. You can locate where they are, see where they have a healthy understanding, and see where maybe there needs to be some mentoring so they understand things better. So, and here's the beautiful part. You can talk about things without your teen feeling so defensive. And as you discuss important topics without freaking out as an adult, and they can see, wow, my mom can talk about tough stuff, or my dad can talk about pretty important things without freaking out about it. And as they talk about other people's or characters' choices or other people's choices, it tends to break down barriers, and they start being more honest about their own life and about their choices. Like, okay, mom, I actually did this too. And it's a beautiful thing to see them open up and be honest about where they're at in life so we can help them and help them grow. And you don't have to use literature. You can watch movies with your teens for fun and then discuss things afterwards, just talking about what characters experienced and the real life dynamics involved. And there have been times we've watched popular shows that all their friends were watching, and I said, okay, we'll watch it too. And we watch it together, and we have some really amazing talks about it. And sometimes we talk about, maybe there's something that maybe I don't love, but we can talk about why it's unwise, or why that character is making a foolish choice in what they're doing. And sometimes we can talk about the real life dynamics that Hollywood doesn't show. So you need to go beyond what was actually shown. I talked about that in the Parenting Corner, the social dilemma. That was a really great one that my kids benefited from us talking about afterwards. And coffee dates are fun ways. You can do like book reviews together or movie reviews together, or just hang out and talk. Now, this approach has worked great with my girls, not so great with my son. Like, he does not enjoy just dissecting media with me. So you'll have to figure out ways to get your teen talking according to your teen's personality and interests. My son responded more through conversations about current events or cultural trends. So a lot of social media memes and posts provide plenty to discuss and to dissect. So use whatever mediums at your disposal to reinforce concepts and develop healthy understandings. Okay, I think I have just a few minutes left here, but that brings us to key number 3 for communicating with teens in a way that works, and that's to master the language of respect. And this might seem obvious, but there are ways that we might be communicating disrespect to our teens without realizing it. And I was recently listening to a podcast by Focus on the Family, which featured Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, New York Times best-selling author of Love and Respect. And I cannot recommend this book as it's on my upcoming summer reading list, but I did find his podcast really interesting as he shared how tweaking our language slightly to intentionally communicate respect, particularly between mothers and sons, can make a huge difference in not only motivating our sons to make better choices, but to help them feel less shame and more value when facing failures. So here are some quotes from that podcast that I think are worth considering. In relationships, 85% of those who stonewall or withdraw are males. However, in conflict, a husband will stay engaged with his wife if he doesn't feel she's using a topic to send him a message that she doesn't like who he is as a human being. These wives started applying these principles to their boys. Instead of these boys withdrawing and stonewalling and just shutting down, these boys were staying engaged. They were actually looking at their mother. They were actually responding. They were actually soft in that response, and the mothers were blown away by that. A boy knows his mom loves him, but he can lack assurance that she respects him. It's important to affirm the child as a person without embracing the behavior, which you do have to deal with. We do not respect bad behavior or love unacceptable behavior. We lovingly and respectfully confront that behavior. Mothers don't have to suddenly become something they're not. Just add some vocabulary words so the boy knows that the real reason here for you confronting him is the behavior, and not that you're using the topic as another opportunity to send a message that you find him despicable as a human being, because that's what he's feeling, particularly if he's failed or feeling inadequate. Is there any vocabulary word that I'm using that would cause my son to think that I don't respect him, that I have contempt towards him, that I despise who he is, that I find him unacceptable as a human being, that he's less than he ought to be? Those are the words that we should refrain from. And he shared an example from a mom who was about to just release a barrage of words, but then she remembered this concept, and so she chose another approach. And she said, "Son, I don't understand what's going on here. I don't want to be dishonoring to you. I don't want to be disrespectful, but can you explain to me why you have these great abilities and why you have a 65% here? Can you help me understand this? Because I'm not pleased, and I'm not trying to dishonor you right now, but I'm upset because I expect more from you." And then he looked at her and said, I'll take care of it, Mom. And then she said that he studied and got his grades up to 95%. So we did not have yelling, tears, or regret. I was absolutely blown away when I used different vocabulary of where I'm not trying to diss you, I'm not trying to dishonor you, I believe in you. I don't understand this. Can you solve this? And she said it was over with. And the author just shared that men are typically solution oriented, so asking your son to solve situations actually communicates our respect for him. And it reinforces that we believe he can solve things. So I love that he doesn't say we can't show emotion. We just have to be respectful of our teen, of his spirit at the same time. And of course, this works showing respect to our teen daughters as well, right? Everyone wants to be valued and respected, especially in our worst moments. So anyway, this might be a resource that you'd like to look at further, but it's just the power of choosing our words as parents and mentors wisely, and then just sometimes it's slightly tweaking what we're doing, and it'll change things dramatically. So, if you want to screenshot this, you can look through this later about some unguarded responses that aren't helpful. Like, of course you did, right? All of these on here are not helpful. But saying things like, I'll look at the very last one. Well, I'm definitely upset by this, but what you chose to do doesn't change my love for you. Okay? It just changes how I see your current level of maturity and the level of freedom that you're able to handle right now. We're going to make some changes. So by focusing on the behavior and not your disappointment, it reminds them that you always believe the best in them, that you don't take their mistake personally or as a reflection of their character in the long run. You're just recognizing they're not mature enough yet to make a healthy choice in that area, and that they're going to lose a freedom that they're going to have to earn back. So we always want to let them know, we do believe in you. You can earn this back, but we are going to have to make a change here. All right, number 4, just leverage words of affirmation and praise. It doesn't matter how old your teen is, they need to hear our words of affirmation, and our praise. And they're not earned. Affirmation is not earned from behavior. It's just we tell them we love who they are. They may act like, oh, I don't need your words, but the truth of the matter is they do. They're like seeds. We can't see what they're doing under the surface, but if we'll hang in there and keep sowing, we're going to see the beautiful result. And you can do it in text by just little tiny things make a difference. I had one girl, I just sent her this little text. I just answered her back. This is another teen reaching out like, hey, beautiful Brooke. It's not her name. But she told my girls later, she goes, oh my gosh, I screenshotted that. It meant so much to me. She was 19. So a lot of times we can just reinforce in very little ways what we see in them. And sometimes you can just start saying things over them that you want them to start believing about themselves that you see. Hugs, great way to affirm our teens. They may make faces or groan, say they don't need it, but sometimes they're healing wounds that we cannot see. And praise, just make sure praise is authentic. So, our teenagers, let me, our teenagers, they know when things are authentic and not. And sometimes our word isn't that trustworthy if we're just praising them for things they haven't earned. So when it comes to praise, just make sure it's things that they've really earned so they can feel confident in what we're saying about them. Just find real reasons. Like, hey, I'm proud of you for not getting mad at your brother just now. Like, that was great, or great job on the test that you studied for and you did well, you did better. So make sure we're praising them for real and authentic reasons. And key number 5 is to learn to be a good listener with good questions. So I think I'm out of time, so I'm going to leave it there. And when I pick up on session 2 or part 2, I'll go a little bit into learning to be a good listener with good questions to make sure that you have some really good information and it won't get skipped from today. So
Lisa, let's go ahead and finish that one. We'll give you
great.
5 minutes because I think that's a good place to kind of, I think that's a valuable piece that you're bringing to the table.
Okay, absolutely then. All right, well, so if you have a chatty teen, you're going to be wise to pay attention because you'll learn a lot about your teen from that continual stream of consciousness that you might be tempted to tune out on a long day. And if you have a quiet teen, it's really important to be a good listener, right? You want to make sure you have a good beat on that heart that they seem kind of reluctant to share. So here's where good and well-timed questions become every parent's friend. So in his 1936 classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie explains how great listeners are often considered great conversationalists, even if they actually say very little. So why? Why would you come away from a conversation with a listener and say, what a great conversationalist? And it's because people feel valued when they feel listened to. And that's what we want. Our teens might not come away from our conversations marveling at our great conversational skills, but they will feel listened to and they'll feel valued. And that is something that our teens really need. They need that validation that we care about what they think and we care about who they are. And honestly, teens can have great ideas. Teens can make things a lot better. A lot of times we're doing something and my kids are like, well, I have this idea. And they actually come up with great ideas. So not only can it help us by asking great questions and listening to them, it can help us locate them developmentally. We can locate them emotionally, but it allows them to be a valued contributor to the family dynamic. That gives them a sense of belonging that's really important. And my husband and I have a friend who happens to be a life coach, and we've run ideas by him as a friend now and then over the years. And in doing so, I noticed that in a lot of our conversations, he asked a lot of questions before giving his thoughts or giving advice. And skilled counselors and life coaches often use questions to help people come to their own conclusions. And I'm not talking about a manipulative thing. I'm just talking about asking good questions in a way that helps lead the person through a process. So it helps them process what's really going on, what are true dynamics here, what principles are involved, and then it helps them for themselves determine how to proceed from there. And as our teens mature, that approach is really helpful. Good questions can create good discussions, and they can help teens discover answers for themselves. And they tend to feel more empowered as they actually participate in the process. Remember, they don't really want to be lectured to. And so if they can be part of the process to understand the whys and the reasoning for making healthy choices, for example, it makes a big difference in it actually sticking. Like they want to do it for themselves. And questions also open up space for discussions you didn't even know you needed to have. So my husband and I were recently sitting down with one of our daughters to make a plan regarding a new endeavor of hers. And I actually did ask her today, I'm not going to sneeze, but I did ask her today if I could share this. And she said, of course. So we were going to make a plan with her regarding this new endeavor of hers. And we needed to set up structures, schedules, make some key initial decisions. And to my surprise, my hubby opened up the meeting with two questions to my daughter. I was like, oh. He said, where do you want to be in 5 years? And what do you want your life to look like by then? And those questions opened up an entire conversation that actually took us all in an unexpected direction, in which she was able to share some current frustrations that she was experiencing. She explained some misunderstandings that existed, some concerns that needed to be addressed, and we had no idea that her heart needed this meeting before the meeting that we were expecting to have. But by starting with asking questions and getting some input from her first, some needed dialoguing happened together. And we ended that meeting with her feeling so much better. And now she was actually excited about where she was in life and where she was headed. So we rescheduled the other meeting until later in the week, knowing that now it would actually be a productive one. So often, if you're consistently making space for your teens to share, asking good questions and drawing them in, they will begin to share, and maybe even more than you anticipate. So just value the moments when all you want to do is go to sleep, or maybe have a precious few minutes to yourself at the end of the day, but your teen daughter just comes and plops down on your bed and she starts telling you like every detail of this book she's reading. Or she's telling you some tea at school, maybe something you're not necessarily that interested in. Maybe she's just laughing and having fun with you because she doesn't want to go to bed. So she wants to extend lights out, but honestly, who cares, right? This won't be available forever. So just remind yourself to enjoy and embrace the precious moment of your teen wanting your attention. Take advantage of special moments like these every chance that you get. And you can build a relationship with some well-timed questions to keep the conversation fun and, if need be, productive, but sometimes just listening and then adding a few words like, oh, I like how you handled that. I mean, it's just enough. So honestly, I just encourage you guys as we wrap up, and then we'll get to a lot of awesome, amazing topics next time, but just make space for the joys of parenting teens and not just the job of parenting them, because it's an exhausting job. And sometimes we're so worried, are we doing it right? Is everything? And we can just get so wrapped up in the job of it that we forget the joy of it. So sometimes, you just got to wake up your son on his 16th birthday with your guitar and your harmonica, and sometimes you got to make your coolest, model face when you're at the orchard, or do you just need to go out for ice cream? So anyway, I hope this is helpful for you guys today to communicate with your teens. And just want to encourage you, you're doing a great job. It's a hard job, but it's a beautiful job. So kudos to you for being here today. And I hope this has been helpful.
Lisa, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I'm already looking forward to the next time, and we're not done with this time yet. So we'll give you a little more heads up about her part 2 that's coming. But what I'd like to do right now is go ahead and take that break. We're going to take 5 minutes, grab your lunch, refresh your drink, do a fluid level adjustment if you need to. And then we're going to come back. And like I said, you will see on the screen breakout rooms for you to go to. Go ahead in those rooms. Just talk about whatever wow moment you had today while you were listening to Lisa. What is your takeaway from today? When we come back we're going to give it 25 minutes. When we come back, we'll go table by table with a couple of quick takeaways and or questions that you might have for Lisa. She'll do a Q&A with you, and then we'll close up the day. So 5-minute break. When you come back, you'll see an invitation to a breakout room on your screen. I'm going to send those out now, and just accept your invitation to the breakout room and enjoy some conversation. All right, thanks. We'll be back in a few.
First of all, I just want to commend you for the great presentation today. Thank you so much for your resources, your wisdom, and for pouring into us. It was very valuable, and our group felt the same. So thank you for that. A couple of the things that we spoke about today, and I'll keep it very brief, is the points that you brought to our attention today were very, very affirming, because a lot of times we find ourselves in power struggles, and these were some great resources and tools to be able to find our ways to get out of those power struggles. A lot of us agreed that sometimes we like to have the last word. And sometimes that's because of our authority, because we're the parent, because we think we know it all, whatever it might be. So the couple of points that you shared today helped us to disengage from those power struggles and to just realize that we need to be transparent, we need to be approachable, and we just need to be mindful of the respect that needs to be given between both parties. So that's kind of our takeaways and what we discussed in our group today. So if anybody else from group one wants to share, but I think that's pretty much what sums up what we discussed.
Lisa, any feedback?
No, I love that we want our student or our, I can call them students, but our teens to respect us, and then how you really double down on the fact that what we're doing, if it's respectful, we're going to get better results. So I loved it. I loved it. Great, great takeaway.
Okay, room number 2. I know some of our rooms weren't full, so I moved people around midway through. Anybody in room 2? Okay, room 3. I think, Sandy, that was your room.
Yes, Lisa kind of started out. We did talk quite a bit about communication in the chat box and in live conversation, how building strong communication with your teen that's the #1 priority. Without that, that's when the ship starts to sink. And that's also applies to other relationships. How a lot of what we learned today we can take and apply to other relationships in our lives. Working with teens that are not our own, even as educators, how do you apply that? And it's about communication and building relationships. And that's when we got into the conversation about these rules. And rules are important. We need to set those perimeters for our children, but you have to have the relationship with those rules, otherwise it goes south. And we have to trust. If we don't trust our kids a little bit, we don't know what they're capable of, and we aren't allowing them to fail. We're putting them, we're helicopter parenting, so it's important to step back sometimes and let them fail, let them try, but let them know that #1 priority is to let them know that your love is unconditional, that there's nothing they can do that would stop you from loving them. So most of our conversation was around that, and it was a good conversation. Lisa, was there anything else you wanted to add to our group talk?
I think the other valuable point that was made was just let's let them have the freedom to fail while the stakes are low.
Yes.
So if your student or your son gets caught fighting at school, he might get suspended. I mean, that's not great. We're not like, yay. But that's a lot different than if we just keep him. He has no freedom. And then when he has a fight after 18, he goes to jail, bigger stakes. So it's really important that we're giving them enough freedom so that they can fail under our loving care. And then we can help them learn and grow so that they're really ready when they hit 18. They've had a chance to have some failures with our direction and guidance. But even social media, parents are like, you can't do any social media till 18. They haven't learned any skills. So then once they turn 18, they might be looking at who knows what because they haven't learned to discriminate under your helpful guidance. So it's good to let them fail while the stakes are low so they won't fail when the stakes are so high.
Thank you.
All right, table 4. I think that was a void table. Table 5.
I believe that was us. I forgot to take note of the room that I was in, but I think it was number 5. And we had only one person at our table who was a parent, but the rest of us were thinking about how the skills that we discussed and the information that we discussed was applicable to other relationships in our lives. And even, we said this might be a little bit of a stretch, but even in parenting pets sometimes, that sort of testing boundaries and like, how can you communicate with them and like discipline in an effective way. but all of us work with teens. So they were, it was interesting how the skills were applicable to other relationships that we have in our lives. And one piece of information that came up that everybody in the table brought up as impactful was the different communication styles between boys and girls. And so we were thinking back to how our parents would talk to us. And me and somebody else in the group were like, oh yeah, my dad, whenever he wanted to talk to me, would always suggest that we go for a walk or a car ride, versus, our moms would talk to us in different ways. So that was pretty interesting, I thought.
So I'm curious, did you talk about how you can apply some of what we're talking about today to students within the programs that we operate?
I mean, we touched on it. We didn't do a deep dive into, okay, we're gonna, use this skill, but we were talking about how, we've thought about how these skills apply to other relationships in our lives. And so therefore, like, oh yeah, I could definitely use this, because I think all four of us said that we work with teens. So we definitely at least mentioned the fact that we're going to take some of these skills and apply them in our work and with the other teens in our lives.
Perfect. Lisa, any feedback, questions?
Nope, I loved it. I love that, good communication is good communication. So you can use it with anybody. Everybody wants to be valued. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be respected. So, you do it out of who you are. Like, I'm going to be respectful. People like unconditional love. Well, you should love me no matter what. But we do unconditional respect, not because their behavior has earned it, but because that's who we are. Like, we show people, we respect someone's spirit even when we're correcting their behavior. And that's really great for teachers. And as teachers, I'm telling you, having taught many, many, many years, it's easy to take it personally. Someone's testing you, they're banging those walls, they're difficult in a classroom setting. You have to be really careful. If you can communicate that it's not personal, then, when you take it personally, it makes you look weak as a leader. When you're getting your feelings hurt, so as a teacher, it's just as important to be like, you're strong, but I'm stronger and I can handle this. And I'm going to calmly and professionally handle the situation. And it just, that's when they'll really respect you the most. So
That's one of the things that I took away from what you were talking about early on, is taking that pause, right? Before we respond to someone's comments or actions or behaviors or lack of response, as sometimes is more the case with teenagers. They're not doing something rather than they're doing something. But, I don't know about the vacation, because I may tend to stay there too long if I start thinking about a nice beach somewhere with a hut. But just remembering to take that pause, because our emotions are, we're people, they're people, and emotions are real. And sometimes in the frustration of the moment, what comes out of our mouth is not really reflective of what is in our heart and our goals and our purpose. So learning to take that pause, I think, is so important, whether you're a classroom teacher or a parent. So, okay, room, let's see, where are we? 5? That was you.
We're at 6.
6.
That's my group. Hi,
There you
guys. I'm Sharbria Shine, work for a Positive Approach to Teen Health. Thank you so much, Lisa. I had the pleasure of meeting you many, many years ago at the Laurel Church through Pastor Victoria. So awesome presentation. Great to see you again. So in our group, we discussed kind of the difference between how some of our parents dealt with us, and which was more of an approach, listen to what I say, I'm the parent. Not always, but a lot of times, more traditional or older school way, sometimes parents were that way. And just learning how to deal with, I'm not a parent yet, but I have nieces and hopefully soon a parent. But in the classrooms or with children or your family, just realizing that they want to feel respected as well. They also want to feel safe, and they want to feel like they matter as human beings, even though you might be the authority in the situation. And I think that is so important, especially some of us that coming from very strong backgrounds with how our parents were. It was no negotiation. It was kind of like, this is what I said, I'm the parent, this is what you do. So just coming out of that thought process or that culture and learning that that may not have been the best, just how to show the teens in our lives that we do still respect and love you. Even if we don't agree with you, we still want to create that safe space for you to share how you feel. And even if it may not be the perspective that we agree with, just to show that we care and respect them. And so that was one of the first ones. The other one was just to be able to share with them and teach them through other people's experiences. And so we loved how Lisa said through her book, she can talk about experiences, but maybe not make the teen feel uncomfortable. Or even if it's not a book, maybe something you saw on TV, a situation in a sitcom, or someone you know. Or get creative and make up a story just to help the teen process maybe what they may be feeling or what they may be going through. And so that's another topic. And then we talked about praising them. I do think that's so important. Me being a newlywed, I'm very, when you said about nagging, I'm so particular about learning how not to nag. I know women can do that so easily and we don't even realize it. So just praising, not only is that great for your marriage, but also dealing with teens. And I just think that's so important to praise the teens in our lives, to let my husband's laughing. He's right there. To praise the teens around us, because it's important for them to know that we are proud of them. Maybe they're going through a tough time in their lives, but that doesn't mean that we look at them bad, as altogether as bad human beings. They might just be struggling. So those are just a few of the topics that we discussed. So.
Awesome. All right. Next. 7.
All right. Oh. There it is. All right. Thank you, Lisa, for your presentation. There's a couple things, and I know some other group members, they want to share some things, but a few things, what it brings light to for us is that a lot of the communication with teens, the onus is on us. And sometimes as adults, we want to blame them in some ways, but when you went through the communication with the keys to communicating with teens, the majority of those are us, deciphering their speech. We have to do that, communicating the right thing, leveraging the words of affirmation and praise. So just a few of those are mastering the language of respect. Like, we have to take that responsibility, and and sometimes we want to put it on them. If we do the things that we need to do, it really will set that precedence for them, and now they have to, it'll trigger a reaction for them so that now they can come back the right way. It even reminded me of the example that you gave when, the parent is like, so did you really do this? And then it doesn't give them a safe place to even be honest. They feel like they don't want to be honest, even though you're trying to egg them to be honest. It's like you're coming with disappointment, already before they tell you. So everything is on us. And if we take care of how we are towards them, I think that it will open their hearts towards us. So.
That was amazing.
So you have a comment, I can tell you do.
I think that's
I'm just
it.
like, woo, preach, I love
I'm
it.
not sure if anybody else is going to add from my group, but.
Well, it just reminds me of what's a President Truman he had on his desk, the buck stops here, right? And at the end of the day, our relationship with our kids, it stops with us. And so it's up to us to come with the best strategies we can and just love them. And I loved everything you said. That was great.
Anybody else from Lewis's group want to chime in?
I think he did a great job. He covered everything that we talked about. We also added being a good listener as well, making them feel valued. So that kind of ties right into what he just spoke about.
Okay, whose group is next?
I'm not sure what our group number was. I think it was 13, but I'm not sure. But basically, we're going to echo a lot of what's already been said since we're coming in towards the end. I think people did share some experiences with their own teens in their own families, but a lot of us were talking about the teens that we work with, which makes it a little bit more difficult to establish levels of trust because you may not see those folks on a regular basis. But we all agreed that being a good listener is absolutely at the top. The words of affirmation and positivity are also critical. And certainly in today's environment, being able to have kids feel that they can be safe, not only in their physical being, but also in their own mind and emotionally, so that they can open up to you and not feel that they're going to be persecuted for what they may say or have done. So I know that we all struggle with the time that we spend with the kids that we work with, and sometimes it's not as much as we would like. So it makes it more difficult for us to develop those relationships fully. But I think hearing all of those key points were wonderful to have them reaffirmed to us, because I know, and I think other people echoed in the group, I'm reminded every day of what I can do better, and establishing what, going it over it and thinking about it. And I think that only makes us better in the field and makes us better parents. So we all also enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks so much. That was great.
Did we
And-
miss? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, well, you said, I know you have a comment, and then it like flew out of my head, but I remembered now what you saw that I wanted to say. But just as we're working with our teens, just remembering that they aren't 40. Sometimes we expect them to be us. We're like, oh, I can't believe you're so mature. Well, they are 13, so, having that understanding of seeing the bigger picture, this isn't who they're always going to be. And so I've loved all the comments. I mean, such great understanding of, it's on us to see the bigger picture. And so we'll talk about that next time, a little bit about being the adult. And it's not easy, but we are the adult in the equation. And just like Lewis was saying, the more that we do the adult things that need to happen, like the maturity of the grown-up, the smoother the journey for sure.
Perfect. I will just open it up right now for just a few questions. If anybody has any questions or comments that they would like to ask Lisa, or comments that you'd like to make that we haven't heard yet, I'll open it up for just a few minutes.
So I understand working with teens and not having enough time to build a good relationship, and just some things I found that were really important when it comes to like discipline or boundaries. It was very crucial that they knew exactly what I expected, and every time they came back to me, they knew that there were certain things that I was not budging on, that it's been a while since we've seen each other, but my expectation of your behavior has not changed. So they try to keep doing things, getting away with things that they know they shouldn't, because they haven't been there in a while. I haven't seen you in a while, so maybe I can get away with this. No, you still can't. Even though it's been a couple weeks, you still can't. And it was important for them to see me, because of course we're not perfect either, and sometimes our emotions do come out in the things we say. It was super important for me to be able to apologize to them and say, you know what, I acted inappropriately, or my words were wrong, and I'm sorry. And you know what, I'm going to do better at that, because I think it was really important for them to know that I was working alongside of them, working with them, that we're walking together, not like I am lording over them, or since I wasn't their parent, that I'm not trying to be your parent. I'm just trying to help you out here. I'm just trying to help you develop into the best you that you can be. And that was really important. It taught them also that it's okay to say sorry. It's okay to mess up and then be like, you know what, I made a mistake,
I just wanted to add from our group, Margie gave the review. brought it to the team. But she talked about in our group that just about even with the time that we lack speaking with the students when we're coming into the classroom for 4 sessions or maybe 8 sessions and trying to develop that. But one of the things that Margie brought up, which was very good, which goes back to what Lisa was saying, is that mutual respect. A student can pick up. They can pick up on where you're coming from, if you're coming barking orders or if you're coming in. We're the guest, and although we are the authoritarian in that moment, we are a guest, and so we speak from a place of respect, right? We're not coming in to, we're coming in to help, as you stated, Jennifer. We're coming in to give them information, walk alongside their parents, guardians, and trusted adults, walk alongside their schools, and to give them that information that they need, and not coming in as the person that's trying to tell them what they can and can't do, right? And so even with that, with time being a complication sometimes, I think it goes back to what Lisa said in the beginning. They want to be right. Students rise to the level of expectation that you give them, right? And so if we don't have an expectation for them, if we don't set that initially, then those boundary lines can be crossed. And so I love having that, where we go into some schools and we have them set the goals for the classroom and then everybody agree on the group agreements, right? And so it works to have that mutual respect from both on my side and theirs, so that we can have the great conversations that are necessary in order for them to, learn the lessons or communicate effectively or learn the skills we're teaching. So I thank you all for your comments. I've learned so much today. I'm a mom of a 6-year-old, but I was reflecting on the teenage stuff. I'm ready for it. Or I'm getting there.
Okay.
Can I jump in, Donna?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so great comments by, both of you coming on here and sharing your heart with this. I mean, I love, I'm substitute teaching right now. We just moved to Omaha, so I've been substitute teaching. So I totally understand what you're saying about every time I enter a classroom, I'm just there that day for an hour and then I'm going to get a new group of kids, right? So I'm constantly like, hey guys, I always tell them I've been an educator for 27 years. So I've done, just to kind of make sure they know, oh, okay, she's done this. But, just saying, here's my expectation. I'm here to make sure by the time you leave today, you know more Spanish than the day that you came in or the minute you came in. But for us to do that, I'm going to show you respect, but you are going to have to show me respect. And then just kind of giving the boundaries. And, most kids, honestly, once things are very clear, will fall in line and will respect what you're expecting out of them. And particularly if you very calmly correct behavior when it deviates out there and you just deal with it. And they're like, okay, well, I guess this is the way it's going to be. And so just communicating expectation, that was a great point to be, just kind of remind us that they can't rise to what they don't know. So that was beautiful. Great job.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay.
Great. So I think that we have reached our time for today. It's 1 o'clock. And as you have already heard and seen, Lisa still has 5 points to go. So we have invited her back to our June lunch tables. So you will, in the next 48 hours or so, be getting a follow-up from this event. It will include a link to our survey. Please take the time to fill out the survey. That's the way that we can best meet your needs. We know what we're doing well, but we also need to know what we're not doing so well. So please be honest, give us your feedback and help us to get better. You will get an email probably from Eventbrite and from us about our May lunch table. Louise Clark is our guest next month. And then Lisa will be back in June. And we're working on some other guests throughout the summer, which is something you can maybe put on your feedback. Do you want to continue these through the summer? Do you want something for July and August? You want to take a month off and hit back the ground running when school starts back up? Give us your feedback about what you want, because really we're here to help you get better. Someone just said, our goal is to help our teens be the best them that they can be. And our goal here at PATH is the same, to help our teens be the best that we can be. But as we step into the role of professional development for all of you, we want to help you be the best that you can be. So help us know what that is. How can we support you? How can we help you be the best that you can be? So you will get the email from us soon with a link for upcoming events for this survey. I know a couple of you have asked about certificates of attendance. Yes, those are available, so we'll get those out. We don't generally send them unless they're requested because we don't want to just send a lot of paper and tear up a bunch of trees. But if you want them and you need something other than the email confirmation that you were here, let us know. We're happy to send that out to you. Any questions before I end today? Perfect. Thank you again so much for joining us today. You all have a blessed afternoon and we'll see you in May.